All right, welcome back. I am excited to have this guest on today. You are going to be seeing a lot from him and hearing a lot from him in the future. He's just an awesome individual. He's somebody that we met recently, a few months ago, and we've done some recording together now. I've got a couple episodes coming out. I've been a guest on his podcast, which is CEO Sales Strategies. That is the podcast he hosts. He's also the founder and CEO of CEO Sales Strategies, which is his organization. Uh, Huge history. This is Doug C. Brown. He has been worked with so many organizations, you name it, everything from NASCAR to Jason's Deli to just director of sales for Tony Robbins for quite a few years. So just to name a few, literally hundreds and thousands of companies he's worked with at this point. And we're blessed and grateful to have him on the show today. We're going to be diving into something that I know a lot of you know you need to do, but also you're resistant to do it because, hey, it's a new year. And so why should we even do this? We're going to talk about follow-up today. And so thank you for being on the show, Doug. It's so great to have you back on here.
Sam, thank you. I'm honored to be here. It's nice to see you again. Thanks for making me sound like I'm somewhat important on, on the intro. It's nice to hear. And now I'll go back, after this, and I'll talk to my children and family who I'm just dad, right? That type of thing, right?
Right.
So,
Oh, I love it. So let's talk about this a little bit. You're, of course, with your history in sales and sales development and sales teams, follow-up is always one of those like huge topics, and it's probably the biggest, highest value activity that any person in sales can do. It's also one of the activities that is done the least in sales. So
yeah.
let's talk a little bit about some of the mindset around it first and why is that important and why is it not and just dive in a little bit.
Yeah. So I love what you said. It's one of the highest value, one of the things that's done the least. The other thing is it's the lowest cost.
Hmm.
Like it usually costs nothing, right? To do this. So
Hmm. Yeah, we already
um
paid for the leads. Now what are we doing with them, right?
yeah, and unfortunately the majority of people out there, they'll contact somebody, they'll have the first conversation potentially, and then they don't follow up,
Hmm.
or they might follow up once. And
Right.
it takes more than one follow-up to usually seal the deal, right? But people forget. So the mindset around follow-up is one that people know they've got to do it, but man, we just get so busy, right? I mean, it's one of those things, and there's not a system around it for most people.
Hmm.
And so, since there's not a system around it, what ends up happening is it just gets deprioritized, falls by the wayside. People don't mean to do that necessarily. It's just that they're on to the next thing that's in front of
Hmm.
them. And then they forget about what they've already done
Hmm.
because, hey, I sold something today. Yay, that type
Right.
of thing. And it's like, well, that's great. But what about the other 30 people that you've talked to over the past, say, week or 2 weeks?
Hmm.
And they have never heard back from you.
Hmm.
And there are sales sitting there. And, it's not always the person's fault. Sometimes the company just doesn't have a focus on it and they work for a company. And, there's certainly no system around it for most people. And frankly, it's hard to do, Sam,
Hmm.
without a system or without the right technology in place. So that's
Right.
why a lot of people drop the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I find is a lot of people, they would have the motivation and actually do it, but another thing that stops them is they just don't feel like they have the right verbiage to use because
Yeah.
we do such a good job creating a great posture throughout the process and during the sales appointment and keeping the right frame of the conversation. But when it comes to follow up, they feel like they lose all their power and it become, begging and chasing, and then that gets gross too. And so that's the other thing. Like, well, if we knew the words to use, maybe we would follow up more. And so talk about that a little bit too.
Well, there's certainly, having the right resonating message is always a good thing to have, right? So you don't want to be like, hey, I'm talking to you about, sword lessons, fencing, and they're like, but I wanted a picket fence,
Yeah.
I mean, that would be completely off.
Hmm.
So it has to be relevant. It has to be meaningful. Um, and the thing is, though, the reason people generally feel that way is not necessarily because they don't know how to, that they're not going to follow up. It's that they just don't really understand the right fit buyer, or
Hmm.
what they're talking about, or what they should be talking about. But I believe the bigger challenge for most people, based on what I know, Sam,
Hmm.
is they're afraid of rejection.
Right.
And so they fear that rejection. So, or they feel, well, geez, if I follow up too many times, I'm going to be a pest.
Right.
And statistically, and I can tell you from my own life,
Hmm.
it is absolutely the opposite that people are
Hmm.
feeling most of the time.
Sure.
People want you to follow up with them because they're so busy and sometimes they forget.
Hmm.
People want you to follow up because it is really a human connection, and they view follow up as a common courtesy.
Right.
I mean, Sam, if you think about it, right? Like, and for everybody listening, if we were going to be courting somebody, like, I don't know, someone we see someone and we go, whoa, they are beautiful looking, and we want to get to know them, and we talk to them and we go out on a date, you know, don't you call the person after the date? Don't you
Right.
either text them, email them, call them? You better call, guys. I'll tell you that right now.
Right.
But I've done the research on it. They want to call within 24 hours. And so the we do all these things. We send little cards and letters and flowers and all,
Hmm.
and we're not thinking the other person's going to be thinking, man, this is, too soon, or they don't want to hear from me. No, 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 we're just doing it because we want to do it, right? But when it
Hmm.
comes to the business side, we think, oh, they're not people. We're dealing with a CEO, we're dealing with a homeowner, or we're dealing with a whatever it is. And so we don't follow up. But here's the crazy part:
Hmm.
statistically, people expect 3 to 5 follow-ups before the salesperson actually stops engaging.
Wow. They expect 3 to 5.
They expect it.
Wow.
And in those follow-ups, they expect phone calls in those follow-ups.
Ooh, dropping some bombs on this one. So everybody that's just emailing, remember, email has what, a 3% open rate, something like that?
And the thing is that when you make a phone call, people don't make phone calls today like they used to. So you differentiate yourself right then and there.
Hmm.
And people are, I mean, I make phone calls and people are like, wow, you called me, right? And it's like,
Hmm.
well, yeah, you're important to me,
Hmm.
right? Why wouldn't I make a phone call with you? And then say this, folks. I'm sure all your other competitors you might be looking at, they're calling you too, right? No, no, they're not.
Right.
Somebody sent me a text. I got a few emails, right? So they expect you're going to follow up 3 to 5 times before you no longer follow up.
Hmm.
But statistics clearly show the opposite, that 50% of people follow up one time, less than 13% of people follow up more than 3 times or
Wow.
more. So when we're doing that, Sam, all we're doing is we're prepping our competitor to walk in there and take the sale.
Right. Yeah, we're just educating them for somebody else to, it's like drive it home, make help them make the decision, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that's how, like, follow up from me came about because of that situation, and it
Hmm.
it really, I would say it wasn't my fault, but in essence it probably was my fault because I didn't call everybody ahead of going on vacation,
Hmm.
and I was working a corporate job at the time, and I was the number one rep at the company. And my daughter got sick while we were on vacation, ended up in the hospital, so we had to stay for another 3 days.
Hmm.
So I call back to my sales manager and I say, hey, I'm stuck here. Could you please have somebody cover my call? Could you please cover my calls? That's what I asked. He said, you know
Sure.
what? I'll get somebody to cover them. Cover your calls, cover your emails. Don't worry about it. We'll take good care of you. I get back 3 days later. My voicemail is jammed full. you couldn't, no more incoming messages were available. My email was at its limit. And no one covered my calls. No one covered my emails.
Oh,
So I
what
pick
a
up the,
disheartening feeling.
it was terrible feeling. And so what I did was I picked up the phone, and back then you had to dial some numbers to get your voicemail.
Mhm.
It's not that one button push, folks. And I got my voicemails, and there were 6 messages from the same person. And the first one was like, "Hey, Doug, how are you? It's me, Jerry. Listen, I'm ready to go. Give me a call." Beep, and then I pick up the
Right.
next one. And it'd be like, "Hey, Doug, where are you? This is Jerry. Ready? I'm ready to go here, right? Come on over." Beep, and then the next
Mhm.
one. And then it was like the fourth one in was like, "Hey, Doug, I'm getting pressure to make a decision here. I got to do something. Uh, Call me. What's going on?" Right. And then, so the fifth one was more intense. Um, and then I picked up the phone and I called him. I said, "Jerry, hey, listen, I'm so sorry. This is what
Mhm.
happened. I'll be right over." Literally, Sam, I had been prospecting this person for 2.5 months. Every week we had talked, and we built such a great relationship. And he said to me these words: "Oh, dude, I'd love for you to come over. But man, I called you last week and the CEO was pressuring me to do the deal. And I bought from your competitor, Lightship."
Oh no.
And I said, "Oh, well, I never heard Lightship's name before. When did you talk to them?" They go, "Oh, they cold called me last week."
Oh, right in the middle of all of the not being able to find you.
Yeah. So I
Mhm.
had I had built up the sale. Everything was good to go. Lightship called him. He said, "Well, why don't you come in and show me what you can do?" They came in. He said, "Well, I haven't heard from Doug, so give me a 5-year deal."
Whoa.
And that cost me $25,000 in commissions. It was
Jeez
a hundred,
Louise.
yeah, it was $125,000 sale. And well, my vacation cost me 4,000, Sam, at that point. So it was,
Whew. It was the cost of being gone as well as that's such a wild story, and I love that you told it because it so many people don't realize how much they're missing out on just by not reaching back out. In fact, I think you have another story from the consumer perspective,
oh yeah,
specifically in air conditioning, that
yeah,
might be pretty applicable here as well. So this is for everybody listening. Doug told me this story over dinner one evening, and I'd love for you to share it now because for people want to hear back from us, right? It's so tell this one. This one will help just reinforce what we're talking about here.
yeah. Those of well, all of us are in the service business, but those of you who are selling specifically service businesses, um, or product service businesses, um, you know, here's what happened. We bought this house that I am living in as an investment, and we decided we were going to flip the house. So we bought the house, prepped the house, got it all done. And then we decided, you know what, we'll move in. And the house didn't have air conditioning. And I was like, "Oh, what a dummy. Why didn't I do this before I actually, right? When all the
Hmm.
walls were open, when everything was there?" Because I know it's going to cost me more money now than it would have cost, right? So, but
Hmm.
I still, my wife wanted air conditioning, so that's what we were going to look at. And so I did. And I called 11 HVAC companies. Let's see. 4 of them called me back. Out of the 4, 2 came over. Out of the 2, one gave me a proposal.
Wow.
It, it was $46,000 to put air conditioning in this building.
Hmm.
I was like, wow, that's a hair more than I figured it was going to be. But so then I called around, and I found another person and I said, "Here's the square footage of the house. Would you come over?" And they said, yes, they came over and they gave me a quote for $34,000. So I was like, "Oh, this is kind of cool." But I like the first guy a lot better than I like the second guy. Trusted the first guy more than the second guy.
Hmm.
So I made some phone calls back to the first guy. "Hey, it's me." Never heard back. The two
How long
people.
has this been going on now?
It has been 7 months. We started in the beginning of the summer, right? So 7 months. It's now January. And I have since called other HVAC companies. I have now, I'd have to look it up. I think it's 16 of them I called. And I believe I've heard back from a total of six. And out of the six, one sent me a proposal that didn't even come over, just sent me a proposal.
Hmm.
Out of the three who sent me proposals, I've only heard back from one person one time. And I said, well, we're going to do this, but I'm thinking of waiting a month or so because now we're getting closer to the summer's over.
Hmm.
Would you get back to me? Sam, what do you think he did? Did he get back to me?
I'm guessing probably not.
No. Here's the crazy, crazy, crazy part. We're ready to buy
And have been for months, it sounds
for
like.
months, for months, ever since September. So now we're in January. We've been ready to buy. And I even got referrals from some real estate agents to some of these people. And I called the real estate agent. I'm like, your buddy's not getting back to me. Your friend's not getting back to me. I'll call again. And they never called. Now,
Oh, geez.
I'm sorry, but if I owned an HVAC company and I had a $40,000 deal that I could close, and I had a salesperson that was on the hook for the 40, grand. I don't know what they pay in commissions there. I could figure it out, but let's say they pay 20%.
Mhm. It's usually right around 10, actually, for most of
Okay,
the
10. All
HVAC.
right. So there's $4,000 to $5,000 right there, right?
Hmm.
Now, the nutty part of this story is usually heating and air conditioning, they don't just do air conditioning because they're called HVAC, right?
Hmm.
Well, guess what I had to get? A new heater.
Probably newer heater. Yep.
Right? So I also had to have some plumbing done in the building. So with that sale, with the heater, with the plumbing, it would have been somewhere between 75 and $85,000 that they would have picked up for the sale.
Hmm.
Guess what I also belong to? A real estate organization or two,
Of course.
right? So guess what they look for? People who are reliable, people who show up, people who communicate well. So this one sale is not a loss of, $80,000.
Hmm.
This could be multiplied times 20. This could be a 1.6, $2 million, loss. And
Right.
so this is how it multiplies out. But yeah, on the residential side, I've had that happen with carpenters. I've had that happen with plumbers. Just in the home improvement space.
Hmm.
Solar people. I had 7 solar people come back. 2 people gave me proposals. One never followed up on the proposal. The gentleman I bought from was on it the day he gave me the proposal. $63,000,
Sure.
right? So the reason I'm giving numbers and all this is because I want people to understand that if you have a $63,000 client and you have a sales team that's messing this up even 30 times a year, you're losing almost $2 million in revenue a year.
Right.
That could be the difference between keeping administrative or operational talent around. That could be the difference between profit and loss. That could
Right.
be the difference between staying in business or going out of business. There's a lot of
100%.
factors that factor into follow up alone that just
Oh,
aren't like, hey, I'm keeping in touch with people.
right. Oh, this is huge too. And for everybody that's listening, 2024, most people, starting mid 2023 actually, but the number of business owners that I've talked to this year that have talked about how horrible the market's been and how the good ones like broke even and they didn't grow, but they didn't take a loss either. So all
Right.
of these conversations by the hundreds are happening across the country. And we're here to say, everybody, start at home. You don't need, the conversation doesn't need to be around the rising cost of digital marketing and how do we get more clients and more leads and more leads. Let's just capitalize on, let's start with fixing our own systems and capitalizing the ones that we already have that we're not serving. We're not even talking to them again. And so that's my message right now is like, let's fix it at home first before we go out for more.
Yeah, because you're paying per lead, folks, right? So Sam, you had mentioned, I've Tony Robbins, right? So
Hmm.
I was president of training and sales for one of their companies. He and Chet Holmes owned the company. And when I took the company over as the president of training and sales, I always look at the numbers because I usually can monetize that within the company. So I looked at the sales team and how they were qualifying leads. And I looked at the leads, and you can imagine they were driving between 1,000 and 3,000 leads a week through this system
Wow.
for years. So
Hmm.
I looked back at the past 2 years and I realized there were 170,000 leads never followed up on.
Holy jeez.
I know it sounds crazy, right? Because the way they were, I'm sorry, over the last 3 years, not the last 2 years, 170,000 leads at $13 a piece,
Whoa. Okay.
right? Never followed up on. So here's what we did. We took all the new salespeople who wanted to be new salespeople, and we said, call back through these 3-year-old, 2-year-old, 1-year-old, 3-month-old leads.
Hmm.
Guess what they were making?
Probably more than the people on the sales floor.
They were picking up sales, a lot of sales. And the thing is that some people were like, geez, I'm so glad you called me.
Hmm.
Now, the reason I bring that line up is because if one of those HVAC companies were to call me back, that's what I would be saying. Geez, I'm so glad you called me in your downtime in the winter time here. You might be up with heating, but I'm sure that you're not being overrun with air conditioning
Hmm.
requests when it's, you know, 7 degrees outside, right?
Right.
So the the point being is back to your original question, why don't people, do they might feel they get rejected or, they're not doing it. Here's the thing. If we call with a modicum of consideration, in other words, we just call and say, hi, look, I'm just following up on our previous conversation.
Hmm.
If we just did that, you'll pick up sales. It's way better than not calling.
Absolutely. Oh, I
So
love it. Oh, this is so powerful. One of the things too for everybody listening is don't say the same thing every time. Some of the expressions that, kind of make you feel powerless are, hey, I'm just circling back, just touching base, all these things. Just can remember, think of it like the conversation is to be continued. So when you're following up, don't say, all those things. Just say, hey, I wanted to continue the conversation we had on this day at this time about this thing. And start it that way. Make it easy on yourself, right? Because it puts people in the frame of mind of, oh yeah, we were talking about that. And man,
mhm.
I'm glad you reached back out, all of these things. So don't lose your posture in that. Just be like, hey, let's just continue the conversation. Where are you in your decision process?
And to that point, which is really great advice. Just because you haven't followed up in a while, don't think your competition has either, right? So, I mean, I just gave you the numbers of how many people followed up with me out of 16, calls or interactions or whatever. And one out of 16. So, and that's the crazy thing about follow-up, Sam, is that a lot of people aren't doing it. So the people who call
Hmm.
actually stand out as the expert. They stand out as the reliable one, right?
Hmm.
And wow, what a positioning to have as somebody, I trust you, you're reliable, because that's when they start picking up the phone for you and calling or emailing or texting their friends and say,
Hmm.
listen, that guy, Sam Wakefield. Yeah, the guy I was telling you about, I want to introduce you to him because
Hmm.
he's the reliable one and he's going to take good care of you. And I'm not worried about my reputation as Doug Brown referring Sam Wakefield because I know
Right.
that you're going to take care of them.
Hmm.
And why don't we have this position? Is this not working easier versus harder?
I love working smarter and easier. It's so much better. In fact, this was really fun. The story that I tell really often is, there was a client that I had that I went to the appointment and we had just I developed real early the habit of bam fam, book a meeting from a meeting. I never left a homeowner interaction without booking another time we're going to get together. What if it was a week, a month, however long down the road. And so I had this one client. We talked once. At first, it was pretty frequently, but then we talked once a month for 6 months. And finally, 6 months down the road, they're like, okay, we're ready. And so when I went back over there, they said, you know what? We were not going to use you. We liked the other company better. We liked the other person better. But you're the only one that continued to reach out to us until we were ready. So clearly, you want to earn our business. And that's why we chose you. And stuck in my brain. And this is probably 7 years ago, and I feel like it was yesterday because it just reinforces this so much. And that was quote unquote their exact words to me. And it's
I
powerful when that happens.
and now when they make a referral, they can tell that story.
Hmm.
And so we are all wanting that story to be told about us. And that's, consistency is helpful, right? Because we all, but even without it, Sam, just
Hmm.
following up, like, I don't know if you've ever done this or anybody on the that's listening to this ever done this, but it's like, wow, I haven't talked to my high school senior classmates in, I don't know, 15 years or whatever, right? Everybody got busy with their own lives. They had
Hmm.
families, they did this, right? Everybody got, so I was on Facebook and oh, I'm sorry, now called Meta. And I was on Meta and I was like, I was looking back through my alumni had a like a class thing, and I'm looking through and I'm like, oh geez, I haven't talked to this person. And so I reach out.
Hmm.
This is a crazy true story. I reached out. Her name was Kristen, and I remember her going out with my friend Mark in high school. And I reached out and she goes, hey, it's so nice to hear from you. I'm like, well, we haven't talked in well over 20 years,
Hmm.
communicated, never mind talked. We haven't talked. And she said, but it's so, so nice to hear about you. And I said, well, did you and Mark ever get married? She said, no, I went on, I got married to somebody else, et cetera, et cetera. I said, oh, that's great. She goes, it is, you know why I'm so happy to hear from you? And I said, no, why? She goes, I was thinking about you. You were my first kiss.
Oh, wow.
Now, I have to admit, I didn't know what she was talking about, right? At the moment, I didn't remember. But I want people to capture the detail, not that I'm an idiot and I forgot that, but to capture the detail that you don't know what people are thinking about
Hmm.
without communicating with them.
Correct.
The fact is that that was important to her in her mind, and she remembered that and brought that forth. It was a
Hmm.
connection point for us to be able to discuss, even though I told her I didn't remember,
Right.
right?
So important, right? One of the interesting things that's kind of popping into my head too is the things that we kind of bringing us back a little bit into our conversation with our clients, remembering the important stuff. And when I say remember the important stuff, I'm not talking about what the project was going to be. I'm not talking about what their demographic is,
Yeah.
what the house looks like, any of those kind of things. The important stuff are, I don't know, what are the dogs' names? What are the kids' names? What are
Yep.
birthdays? What are the important relational things
Yep.
that keep us connected to that? There's a book. At this point in time, it would be called a business classic, a historical book called How to Swim with the Sharks Without Getting Eaten Alive by a gentleman named Harvey McKay.
Yeah.
And it was one of the very first business books I ever read.
Mhm.
So for everybody listening, highly recommend that book. It's how this is done. And so Harvey was, of course, and is considered the world's most networked person, right? The world's greatest networker of all time is this gentleman that wrote this book. And so for everybody that's your sneak peek into the book. But this kind of brings us forward into where we are today with like these philosophies and these concepts and ideas that were kind of forgotten as we got into the digital age. And tell us a little bit about what we're doing now with kind of bringing a lot of that back and in our follow-up process.
Yeah. So you're bringing up such an important part, right? Because that was the second trigger for me. I forgot the kiss,
Hmm.
right? So now here's the interesting part of that. Later on, I met Harvey McKay. You had mentioned Harvey.
Hmm.
I saw Harvey speak at an event, and I walked up to him, and I was so moved by what he was saying. I said, "Mr. McKay, could I ask you a few questions?" He said, "Well, kid, carry my bag to the limo." And I said, "Sure." And so we got talking about these issues that you're talking about. How is he a great networker? And what he remembers is all these little details.
Hmm.
And this is what he conveyed to me. And, I was like, okay, well, I forgot a first kiss, right? And he's like, oh, no, 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 kid, no.
Hmm.
And, being a younger guy, I mean, I'm in my 60s now. So, I mean, we're talking, in my 40s. And
Hmm.
at that time, he was, much older than I was. But what he told me about is he said, I keep a log of something I call the McKay 66. And I
Hmm.
keep 66 important fields. And so now fast forward, this is, I don't know how many years ago now, 20 something years ago that he told me this. I had been putting into practice what he was teaching.
Hmm.
And so when people would call me, or I would call them, or we would talk or email, it'd be like, well, how's Margaret doing? Is she still struggling a little bit with algebra, or is she doing better?
Hmm.
And they'd be like, wow, you remembered that,
Hmm.
right? Those are the connection points that you're talking about. But,
Exactly.
but if you don't have a system to be able to do this, it's, I mean, you can't use sticky notes and you can't use a
Right.
notepad, right? If one doesn't have a system, then that system will not, there is no system. It breaks down. It's that
Sure.
simple,
Hmm.
especially if you have, 100 or more people that you're communicating with on a regular basis. So,
Right. Yeah, we definitely can't expect to remember it all.
no, no,
Right?
no, no, no.
We're doing so much anyway. It's like, how would we remember all those things? It's have a hard time remembering. Most people have a hard time remembering their own like wedding anniversaries and children's birthdays, let alone details of 1,000 people they're interacting with.
Well, now you're going to get a lot of men in trouble, right? By that, if ladies are listening to this for sure. Um, so, we started building a technology system to actually close the loop on this thing. And I did it because where we're working with clients and we're working with clients who are working with clients,
Hmm.
we noticed the common thread that it just wasn't us that didn't really have a system for this follow-up process. Now, but we were way better than other people were,
Hmm.
right? We were keeping paper calendars. We were doing all that stuff to try to say, okay, every 30 or every 60 days, we're going to reach out.
Right.
And one of these things that I would do in companies, so companies who are paying attention here, all first thing I would do with your company is I would be like, well, how long have you not communicated with your dormant clients? In other words, people who bought from you, right?
Right.
So we start to re-engage those people and they pick sales up. The next thing we do with the sales team is we say, okay, you're going to reach out to 3 people a day.
Hmm.
To the number, it ranges between 5% on the low end and 15% on the high end at the end of the year, but just reaching out to 3 people a day. And it's not to sell them something, it's to reach out to go, hey, Sam, how's things going?
Hmm.
Right? How's things with the kids? How things with the business? Right? And just that human connection.
Hmm.
So what we did, Sam, is we decided to build a system and we said, we're going to make this all about personalized, meaningful, relevant, and as automated as possible follow up that has that human to human connection. So it's not going to come out like, hi, first name, this is this or whatever, right?
Right. I hate getting
Um,
those mass emails from especially companies I think or have it together and then they get miss something like, hey, first name
yeah, yeah,
instead of like even having my name in there.
yeah. I just got one of those from my hospital.
Oh my gosh. That makes you feel very well cared for.
It's, it's like, let's talk about rapport break pretty quick, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
we just replaced part of your body and okay, we can't even remember what your name was. You're a nice number. Thanks.
yeah, it's exactly how I felt, and do feel that way still. So, we designed it so that it would take persona fields, kind of what Harvey was doing, and kind of business buyer persona fields
Hmm.
and persona fields from people, and we track these persona fields. And technology's made it easier for us to do that, and we then take those persona fields and we wind those into relevant, meaningful, timely communication.
Ooh, I like it.
All right. And then what we do is we automate a lot of the processes around that so that you can actually look at the communication and say, yeah, send that or don't send that. Or, something like, how many people remember birthdays? Like, very few people, right?
Hmm.
Remember, unless it's like really close friends, they don't remember. And so not only reminding you of the birthday, but what if the system pulls up a message that says, hey, happy birthday. By the way, being born in 1974, these four things were important in 1974. And I know you love to play, chess. And did you know that Bobby Fischer in 1974, it goes on and on and
Sure.
on, right? And by the way, that's all done automatically. You didn't even touch it,
Wow.
right?
That is
And
so cool.
yeah, and so it's this way of staying in touch with people so everyone stays top of mind.
Hmm.
It's not that, whether it's personal or business, it's not that people don't want to stay in touch. It's just they get busy in their own space. So,
Sure.
but if they do stay in touch, as you were saying in the beginning of our conversation, how much money is being lost on the table, even if
Hmm.
you're off by a small percentage, right? I looked at some statistics yesterday. There are trillions of transactions going on daily across the world.
Sure.
So think about 1% of 3 trillion transactions a day that don't go on because someone didn't follow up.
Wow.
It's a ton of money, right?
That is enormous. I'm gonna grab a calculator and do that right now, just for everybody listening, right? So 3 trillion. So make sure I get enough zeros in here. Let's see there. Oh my gosh, yeah, that's a huge. Geez, Louise. I
Yeah.
my calculator maxed out.
Well, and to put it into perspective, like with somebody, well, that's a lot of transactions. We don't do
Hmm.
that, right? So I was looking up all these like little crazy stats, like how many surgeries are done a day worldwide. There's 857,000 surgeries a day done
Hmm.
worldwide. Well, what if there was a 1%, I don't know, error? They didn't follow up with 1% of the patients who came out of anesthesia.
Oh, how awful would that be?
It's
It's,
only
it's
like
making it
80.
way more real, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
and like so we were talking about too at the beginning, like the numbers that, just like really hit me were, you're talking about just the small amount, extending the number from your own personal experience into some of the trades, so you could be leaving a couple $1 million on the table. What would that do for an organization that's, maybe a $4 million a year organization, a five, six, seven, right? Let alone, obviously the larger organizations, but I mean, and these are not exaggerated numbers, everybody. This is literally what's sitting there that we're not doing anything with. And just like you were saying, I almost guarantee if you didn't hear a direct no from your homeowners, drive back by that house. They haven't done anything. One of the traps, mental traps we get in is, well, they didn't buy from us, they didn't get back with us, so they must have gone with someone else. But for the most part, that's not true. They just got stuck in this decision paralysis. and need someone to help them over the line. And that's why we get paid what we do as salespeople, because not everyone can do that.
So I'll illustrate that by I was on a sales training call for sales consultants.
Hmm.
A friend of mine invited me to listen in, and a lady comes on the call and she says, guys, you got to follow up. And the gentleman who hosted it said, well, what happened? Tell us, right?
Hmm.
And she said, well, 7 months ago to the day, I called this guy. And he said, I can't do anything for 6 months. And would you call me back in 6 months? I'll be ready to really have that conversation. And she said, yes. And she got busy and forgot.
Hmm.
And she was looking through some of her past correspondence and leads and things. And she realized she hadn't called this person back in 6 months. So a couple days went by and then she called him. It was 7 months, she told us, to the day. It was the day she came on this call.
Hmm.
And the gentleman said, well, what happened? And she said, well, the guy actually remembered me. I said, hi, it's me. Listen, I'm sorry I didn't follow up, like I said, in 6 months. Just life got ahead of me, blah, 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 blah. He said, well, it's really great to hear from you. I'm so glad you called me and that things are good for you in your life. She said, well, I'm ready, if you are, to re-engage in that conversation. And he said, well, I'd love to, but I guess you didn't hear the news. And she goes, what? He goes, I bought from your company. And she goes, well, what do
Wow.
you mean? He goes, well, I bought from Peter in your company. And she goes, Peter M in New York? He goes, no, Peter R in Seattle. What do you mean? Well, about a month ago, Peter R called me and we started having communication and I asked him about you and he said, well, I, don't really know you. You're kind of a big company. And so anyways, we closed the deal with Peter, like a week ago.
Wow.
And she said these words, you got to follow up, guys. It was a 5-year deal. My commission on the deal was 500,000 US dollars a year.
Holy cow. $2.5 million worth of missed commission from
Yes.
not following up.
Yes. On time too, right? So now imagine this, Sam, if she had just been sending an email or a text message or just called and got his voicemail and left and said, hey, this is Amanda. I want to give you a call. Listen, I know we're not going to talk for another few months. So the gentleman who was hosting the sales training asked her, he said, what happened? She said, I just forgot. And she's like, you guys have to follow up
Hmm.
or you miss out. And the crazy part of the story is Peter R in Seattle got 3 referrals from this guy.
Jeez. And people know people like themselves, so I can imagine they were probably fairly equivalent accounts as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So imagine, I mean, if he just closed 1 or 2 out of 3, I mean, the gentleman's making $1.5 million a year off a dropped ball. So to your point, right? We gotta,
Hmm.
it's not hard to do, but to your point, people will make the assumption that the potential buyer is not interested. So they immediately deprioritize it, but not just deprioritize it, stop communicating.
Hmm.
So in our system, for example, we have the ability coming up where if you stop communicating, the system will actually promote you to say, do you want to reach out to Sam?
Oh, nice.
Right. And it will actually light up in your system and say, warning, warning, that type of thing. So, and it will create the message for you. And that way you can just stay in touch.
Hmm.
And, because if she had just stayed in touch, when that guy in his 5th month, he might have been like, listen, we're going to be ready to really talk about this next month. And
Hmm.
she would have made
Yeah.
that call on
Go
that
ahead and
day.
schedule the date. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is wild. And when we very first started talking about this, it's something that I recognized is one of the very biggest missing pieces in what, well, clearly the example of your 11, 16, 17, HVAC companies that are not
Yeah.
getting back to you in your area. But that's the problem is, and the whole point is that's everywhere. It's not just because you live in a certain specific city or zip code. It's every single one
Oh
that
yeah.
around the world. This is a
Yes.
global issue. And, we of course recognize it in the trades. And so for everybody listening, if you're not following up, you don't have a process to it, you don't have a really great system that helps automate it so it happens. Right? I would rather see something 80% complete that's usable than something that's perfect that waiting for something perfect that we don't use. Right? You just got to do it. And so, and that's for everybody listening. That's why I'm excited about one about having Doug on the show because his massive wealth of knowledge and experience, but also he's creating something that is really the for this type of thing is the coolest thing that I've seen probably ever. It's about as innovative as if you're on Service Titan and you were not on Service Titan, the ability and the things that it can do versus your other, workflow system before. So tell us a little, let's get a little more granular because so for everybody listening, Doug has developed this program it's a combo of a couple things. I'll let you give the details of what it is and what it does. But for everybody, listen, I am one of the first people to sign up for this. I am using it for my company for Close It Now because, especially if you're a one-man show out there or you're a smaller company, your bandwidth gets maxed out. That's another reason people don't follow up is they just don't have the time, or they think they don't because they don't understand the priority of making follow up as part of their process, especially if the organization is, has not built in follow up as their culture. And so that's the other reason I'm so excited about this to help people automate a lot of this and buy your time back and be able to do that. So tell us a little bit more about the program and all the things it does and where it's headed.
Yeah, so we called it vibitno.com, VIBITNO. And it's kind of a mouthful to say, but the reason that we chose the name was we were looking originally trying to find names and to describe this. And we came up with You Matter. Right. Right. So we're like all excited. Oh, we got youmatter.com. Well, guess what? It's not available. Um,
Sure.
so then we did like searches on, dozens and dozens of possible ways of spinning it. Just wasn't available. And then we came across a Slavic term that meant you matter,
Hmm.
the esteemed one, you know, and it's Vibitno,
Hmm.
Vibitno. So we took the name as vibitno.com. And we started with the premise of we're going to, we don't want to, even though we have a CRM component, we don't want to be a CRM only, right? So
Right.
we're going to start with how do you get a contact into play and continue to follow up with that contact? So, for example, you take your cell phone, you're at a networking event or a trade show, or you just
Hmm.
meet someone, and they have a business card. They give it to you, old school. You take a picture of the card, and the card then gets read into your Vibitno system, and you got your first queue up for sending follow up that's automatically created for you.
Hmm.
Now, we can also templatize some of these processes. So let's say you were at a networking event, the networking event's ending at 5 p.m. and you want everybody to get their first message at 5:17 p.m. And it's each individualized to each individual person because you've been putting some fields into the system to personalize that process. And so, bam, you talk to 37 people, 37, first connections go out that day. And
Wow.
right. And so now you have a contact and you've put it into play. You have a contact you met at I don't know, let's stay with the services business, right? You go buy a home and you meet with the spouses and you got their information, and you get back into your van, and your first follow-up now goes out to them before you even turn the key on the van,
Wow.
right? About what you communicated with. So it was
Hmm.
about how to put it in play and then how to stay in touch with them when you can't,
Right.
right? And also how to manage those relationships as well. So then we said, all right, we're going to build in the ability to manage that through a CRM. So we put a CRM into the system.
Hmm.
But what we wanted to do, Sam, is that we wanted the system to turn into a revenue improvement like a system for people. So we
Sure.
know if you follow up that you're going to get responses and referrals and you're going to close more sales. Well, we started tracking all these metrics in the system,
Hmm.
right? So you can actually see what you're getting from follow up and how it is actually applying to your life in real time.
Hmm.
You can also see when your reps or other people aren't doing it because we give the owner the ability to take a look at everything, right?
Sure.
And automate the reporting so the reporting comes in or it says something like, hey, Doug's not doing his follow-up on this or whatever, and so you know that you can intercede with that. So that was the crux of the system. The system was, how do we bond, do personalized, meaningful, and relevant
Hmm.
information, and how do we build relationships not just for now, but how do we build these relationships for in perpetuity?
Right.
Because if most of us look back on our lives and we go, geez, we have met hundreds or thousands of people. And if we had just stayed in touch with thousands of people on a
Hmm.
regular basis, then when we needed a favor or we needed something where, we're going to open our business or we're going to do whatever, we could go back to those thousands of people
Hmm.
and we could ask and say, hey, I need your advice. I need your help. I'm going to pre-sell this out. I've got a new sale going on this or whatever.
Hmm.
And one of the next gens of the system that we're looking at, Sam, you love innovation. So I figured I would tell you this because you're not
Absolutely.
aware of it, is we were actually looking at the persona fields because, it's going to keep track of not only the person, their education, were they in the military, their spouse's information, their children, their children's information, their hobbies, their interests on everybody, affiliations and things like that. But imagine something like this. And we were just having this conversation with the development team. Imagine Days coming up in February, right?
Right.
And you know, uh, you know, my wife, for example, she loves uh, tulips. Now, the thing to go out on Valentine's Day is maybe to buy roses.
Sure.
But imagine if somebody sent me a message saying, "Hey, Doug, I was just thinking about you and Justina, and I remember Justina loves tulips. Remember, Valentine's Day is coming up. I did a little research, and the best place to buy tulips are these two places in your area,
I love it.
right?
That is adding value right there.
Right. So it gets very it gets relevant and meaningful and personal,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And personalized, I should say. And you can go to whatever level you want with the system, but that next gen's going to start pulling and start making recommendations for people like, let's say, so I did this manually, for example. Um, I have a gentleman, he just sold his company. He sold it for 23 times EBITDA. He was a
Ooh,
$100
nice.
million company, so he had a really nice exit.
That's a nice exit.
He was in the aviation business, and in my system, I recognized his birthday, and I'm like, I wonder what great things happened on the month of his birth, right? Well, do you know that his month of his birth is National Aviation Month?
Well, geez, no wonder. What a coincidence.
So I send him a message and I say, hey, I don't know if you know this, but your birthday's coming up. But did you know your birthday? I realized that it's National Aviation Month of the birthday,
Hmm.
and Also, here's three or four great people who were born in the same month as you are, who are also tied to the aviation industry.
Hmm.
Maybe it has something to do with the month you were born in. What do you
Sure.
think? Sam, that guy like picked up the phone and called me and
Right,
he
just had
said,
a
"Hey,"
2.3 billion dollar exit, and he's dialing you on the
and
phone.
he's dialing me, thanking me, saying how amazing this was. And oh, by the way, we were thinking about something in the company. I'd like you to have, chime in on it and tell me what you think about it
Wow.
on our new company we're starting up.
Uh-huh.
So it's like when people get personalized and meaningful, information, then we no longer think this is business, even though we understand it's business.
Hmm.
We're not crossing the friendly line and taking the pressure out of the sale. What we're doing is we're actually dealing with the two things that people make decisions on: a business return on investment and a personal return on investment. And both of
Hmm.
those are included in each sale. And it does not matter if you're selling business to business or business to personal,
Hmm.
business to consumer. They're still thinking like with the air conditioning, I'm thinking, whoa, okay, 46 grand. That's a little more than I was thinking for air conditioning. Now it's a bigger home and I get it, but
Hmm.
it was still a little higher than I figured. So now I'm justifying the numbers in my head. Like, all right, well, if we hold on to this place for 10 years, it's $4,700 a year for air conditioning.
Sure.
Um, and I'm doing all that. But on the personal side, I have three ladies in the house, wife and two daughters.
Hmm.
Well, proud daddy, proud husband feels, man, if they're comfortable and they're doing great, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I feel great.
Hmm.
There's the personal return on investment,
Right.
right? Their friends come over, spend some time in the house. They go, whoa, this is great. You got all this central air flying around and all this mini splits and all this other stuff, right? Or they get mini splits because they can control the temperature in their room. So versus like, just regular old air conditioner that comes out of the floor
Hmm.
and one room's freezing and you got to shut the vent a little bit, right? Now you got personalized. So
Hmm.
one of them likes it cold, one of them likes it a little warmer,
Right.
whatever.
Make everybody happy.
They're happy, I'm happy,
Yeah.
right? But from the emotion, because we all base our decisions on emotion, justify with logic, but that logic is justified with another emotion.
Hmm.
We do this on the business side and on the personal side. And that's
Wow.
where it closes the loop
Hmm.
between the two of them and makes it one.
Yeah, this is so, so, so powerful. I can't wait to dive into this a lot more. We're getting super close on time here today. In fact, that the conversation between the emotional and the logic, the business interaction there, that we could do a whole nother podcast, I'm sure, just on that topic.
Sure.
The understanding the emotional bank account that we're investing into along the way. And the everybody has heard, well, people buy from people they know, like, and trust, but that's it. That's where most people stop. It's like, what
Right.
does that actually mean? We can unpack that another time, not necessarily on this show. But I'm so excited about this, about Vibitno, because it's the missing piece for so many people in so many ways. It literally is good at with everybody. I'm telling you, you're sitting literally on millions of dollars of sales of people that you saw this last year that didn't close, right? You
Yeah.
would just have to get back in touch with them. While you're busy running the business forward, a tool like this can be the thing to look in that rearview mirror and be pulling up that trailer, and that trailer gets bigger and bigger and bigger as you go. So one thing I want to let everybody know about is we are going to be doing a webinar on this. We're gonna do a lot more in-depth training on some actual scripting for follow-up. We're gonna really give some key steps, some great best practices for what does a follow-up calendar look like. Obviously, every industry is a little different, but what's the frequency? How often should we be reaching out? How do we set up the conversation to start with? All of those things. And then we're also going to go through a bit of a demonstration of what this program will do, because I'll tell you, every single one of you out there, you need this program. This is something that I don't care what else is out there. Some of the different text automation tools in our industry, they do not do what this one does. This one has it. We'll use the buzzword. It does have AI as part of as part of the build, and because it's so powerful, and it is really one of the best ways to get where we want to go. Feel free to add anything at this point that you want to this,
Yeah,
Doug.
yeah. I wanted to let people know this. It took about 2 years to actually put this together because we didn't have AI when we were starting, right? And so we were
Hmm.
actually getting things to start to work without AI. And all AI did was make it easier to do.
Hmm.
And so the thing about AI is AI does a lot of great stuff, but it's not that personalized, right? It doesn't
Right.
have emotional, intelligence to that level. So what we did is we took the emotional intelligence and we use AI to actually enhance the emotional intelligence in the system. And, Sam, I was just talking with somebody earlier today and we were having this conversation because we did a LinkedIn post and we just put out something on the follow up. And I had never seen response like this to a LinkedIn post,
Hmm.
what we put out. And I mean, we've been doing LinkedIn for years and it was all around follow up. And it was a really good point. Somebody said, well, if I'm dropping 200 grand a year in personal sales, would I hire a full time person at $30,000 a year just to follow up with me? I mean, for me. And people are like, well, that's a yes, I would do that. Yes, I
Yeah,
would do,
no
right?
brainer, right?
Right. And I'm thinking, you could do that for a fraction of what,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? So you had mentioned that people are losing millions of dollars in sales. Yeah, that's true. And if you, not to push the pain, but if you think about it, think about over the last 10 years, how many sales you have dropped. And over the next 10 years, how many sales you won't get. And if that's not painful enough for you, well, then, this is not as important to you. And I get
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
But if it is, then, I to promote what you just said, come to the training because
Hmm.
you won't be disappointed. There'll be some really good actionable things you can take away. Whether you invest in the technology or not will be up to
Right.
you, but you'll still be able to walk away and start some processes going for you in your business.
Hmm. 100%. I love that so much, and it's the sales is two directions, right? When we're thinking about sales, it's looking into the future and it's looking into the past. We sit in this moment, which is like our moment of now. But every top performer, for everybody listening, we've talked about this so much in this podcast, is if you only stay in the conversation right now, you're missing the boat.
Yeah.
You have to help them look back into the pain and the things that they want to correct. And you have to help your homeowners in your sales appointments look into the future and understand how life is going to change and be different based on either the project or equipment. It's nothing about your equipment or what your service you're doing. It's everything about how their life is going to be different and how to change moving forward. It's the same thing in our business, right? So let's move it over there. It's like our business is both looking forward into the future, all of the new business, all of the leads. How do we get more leads? How do we connect with our clients? But the second we turn around and look at that rearview mirror, there's a saying from a classic business book in the HVAC space. Everybody pay attention to this. It's called HVAC Spells Wealth by Ron Smith. He had the very first two people in the industry to sell over $1 million a year when the average ticket was right around $3,000. So that's doing a lot of volume. The part I want to emphasize here is neither one of them, they did not take new leads or appointments from their company. They only went back through their database and their filing cabinet from all of their service technicians' tickets. And they sat there, and this is in the 80s, they sat there and cold called every past client. Now, let's take that into what we're talking about now. Looking into the rearview mirror with our clients, what the line that comes from that book that I want to emphasize here is the goal is not to get clients. The goal is to get and keep clients. We don't just get customers, we get and keep customers because that is how organizations build long time lasting value, right? The huge EBITDAs don't come from a company that, started and blew it up in 3 or 4 or 5 years, and now they have a high volume, but nobody knows what the history is going to look like when they're out of a boom, right? Sure, a few people have done that, but the highest valuations, the 20 or 30 EBITDA from organizations that sells from lasting client base that don't go anywhere. And this is how to do it. This building the relationship over time. So excited about it. So let's get some dates here real quick. It is going to be on January. So I want to get the date exactly right because we had a little bit of a typo at first with the date. It is going to be on the 16th of January, and that is 2 weeks. Let's see, from the date of recording. This episode is going to go live on January 3rd, which will be just under 2 weeks from when you hear this episode, if you hear it the day it releases. So January 16, 2025. You can, in the show notes, will be the link to sign up for. Just put your name in. We'll send you all the contact information. It is good. And then also join the Facebook group, the Close It Now Facebook group. I've got the link, and we're going to talk about it a lot in the Facebook group. So I'll make sure to get the replay of this podcast up in there, as well as go to the show notes, and you can get the link to find out the information of how to get into this webinar. We're going to give you very actionable language and tips and process and everything that we just talked about. Plus, give you the opportunity to check out Vabit now. It's gonna if this is the first time you heard of it, but it won't be the last. It is going to take over the trades for companies that, and basically everywhere, companies that need to reach back out, because if you don't adapt and change, you're going to get left behind. You better get used to extinction if you don't like to innovate, go with the innovations. So there's the very specific plug, because this is not about selling at you something, everybody. That I only bring things onto the show that you can use to make a massive difference. So give us some parting words, Doug. Tell us, drop another nugget, because I know you're full of them. And yeah, tell us a little bit of a send off here.
Yeah, I think, I was listening to your conversation and they're calling back through their old dormant leads, basically, right? And they were selling $1 million a year at $3,000. So that means that they were selling one system a day, one a day from old leads, just
Hmm.
following up.
Yeah. And this is in
Now,
like 1984, 1985.
yeah, I mean, the profit margin on that sale, because the lead cost is already sunk, right? They've already
Hmm.
written it off. Like, when the leads were 3 years old at Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes, right?
Hmm.
They had already written that money off in previous years. So that year, that lead cost nothing at that moment. And
Hmm.
so imagine selling one new system a day, every single day at zero acquisition cost, except maybe you're paying a salesperson to call, right?
Right?
Your profitability skyrockets on that. And it's like, here's the thing I want to leave people with, Sam. if if we are, why did we get in business in the first place? It was to make money, to make a difference for most of us.
Hmm.
Okay, so if we make money and we're not making a difference, you're not going to be as happy. If you're making a difference but you're not making money, you're still not going to be happy.
Right.
So if one of those people had followed up with me on the air conditioning, and by the way, if you have an air conditioning business, you'll have my contact information. So reach out and quote me, right? If they had to put the air conditioning in by now, the mini splits also have heat here.
Hmm.
We had a power outage and the generator wasn't working at one time, but then the generator worked, but we couldn't get the heater back on. So if we had had the mini splits, we could have heated the bedrooms, right?
Hmm.
That makes our days happier. And
Right.
and so what I want people to understand is follow-up's not just the act of following up, it's the act of building and connecting with human beings to better their life as well.
Hmm.
And so if you're into doing that, which I hope you are, if you are in business, because you will be far more successful, then, come to the training that we're going to do. I've got a bonus to give away to people at the training, Sam, that I hadn't even mentioned because we created it for your training. So
Oh,
um,
nice.
we'll do a gift
Well,
and
we are
uh,
grateful for that.
and we'll go from there. But thank you for having me on. I'm very grateful.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for being on again, everybody. Pay attention to the show notes. January 16th, 2025, we're going to be really showing this thing off, show you what it can do, and show you, more importantly, how it can recapture all of those very, very expensive and hard to earn new clients, right? The average right now for the HVAC industry, for the trades, new client acquisition, if you don't know this, if you're a business owner, you have to know these numbers. If you don't know this, this is an important number to pay attention to. New client acquisition right now is averaging between $800 and $1,200 per new client. Every single time you set an appointment, knock on that door, and it doesn't sell, you might as well be throwing away $1,000. Just throw it right in the campfire if you don't do anything with it after that. This is a way to recapture that. Plus, the plus is, of course, everything that comes out of it is sales. So that's new client acquisition is enormous. Why spend that money if you don't have to? That's why we love things like door knocking in Close It Now. That's why we love canvassing. That's why we love guerrilla marketing. All of the ways we can get in front of new opportunities very cheaply and efficiently and without costing more. So this is it. Let's go. Let's just look back, right? And so thanks, Doug, for joining us again. It has been an honor and a pleasure. Definitely look forward to the webinar we're going to be doing. Everybody else, you know how we end this. Go out there, be someone worth buying from.